The vastness of space stretched endlessly before Captain Adrian Voss as his sleek, black fighter, Valkyrie, glided through the darkness. He had been on many missions before, but nothing like this. This was not just another reconnaissance flight, this was a journey into the unknown, a place where no human had ever returned from. The Earth Alliance had lost several drones in this region, each one disappearing without a trace, and now Adrian had been sent to uncover the truth. The orders were clear: investigate, report back, and, above all, survive. But something about this mission felt wrong. He could sense it in the stillness, in the way the stars seemed dimmer, as if the universe itself was warning him to turn back. Yet, there was no turning back. His hyperjump drive had already activated, pulling him into the unknown sector at speeds beyond human comprehension. As the ship emerged from the hyperjump, the first thing Adrian saw was destruction. Floating wreckage drifted in the void, remnants of ships torn apart by some unseen force. Some were alien, their twisted metal and strange symbols completely unfamiliar. But what made his heart race was the sight of a human ship among them. It was old, covered in deep scars from past battles, but there was no mistaking it. It was an Earth Alliance vessel. The EAS Horizon had vanished nearly 30 years ago, and here it was, its lifeless hull drifting silently among the ruins. A cold shiver ran down Adrian's spine. If this ship was here, then what had happened to the crew? He activated his scanners, searching for any signs of life, but there was nothing. No distress signals, no movement, just eerie silence. Taking a deep breath, he maneuvered Valkyrie closer, aligning it with one of the airlocks of the horizon. His ship's automated systems worked quickly, attaching a secure docking line, and within moments, he was stepping into the derelict ship. The moment he entered, the air felt heavy, as if time itself had frozen. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long, unsettling shadows. Adrian moved carefully, his boots making soft echoes in the empty corridors. Dust floated in the zero-gravity environment, disturbed by his presence. He passed through the control room, finding shattered monitors and broken equipment. It was clear that a battle had taken place here. But against what? His mind raced through the possibilities. Pirates? A rogue AI? Or something far worse? As he moved deeper into the ship, he noticed something strange. There were no bodies. No sign of the crew at all. It was as if they had simply vanished. Then his eyes caught something that made his breath hitch. A helmet. A human pilot's helmet resting on the ground, covered in frost. But what sent a chill down his spine was the insignia on it. This wasn't just any pilot's gear. It belonged to Commander Elias Carter, the very man who had led the Horizon on its doomed mission 3 decades ago. And yet, the helmet looked brand new, untouched by time. Adrian's grip tightened on his blaster as he heard a noise, a faint mechanical whisper coming from the ship's main deck. He turned sharply, his heart pounding. The sound was rhythmic, almost like a signal. Steeling himself, he followed the noise, his every step careful. When he reached the command center, his stomach twisted. The control panels were flickering, struggling to function despite the ship being long dead. A message was repeating on the cracked screens, its meaning clear even through the distortion. Do not trust them. Do not engage. Leave while you still can. The warning repeated over and over, each word carrying an urgency that sent a wave of unease through Adrian. But who had left this message? And who were they? Before he could react, Valkyrie's alert system buzzed in his earpiece. Unidentified movement detected. His blood ran cold. He spun around, weapon ready, but there was nothing. Yet, deep in his gut, he knew he was not alone on this ship. With every second, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. His training kept him calm, but the tension in the air was suffocating. The message had told him to leave, but he needed answers. He activated his helmet's recording system, scanning the ship for any hidden data logs. The moment he did, the emergency lights flickered wildly, and the ship's AI, barely operational, crackled to life with a distorted voice. They are coming. Adrian's pulse skyrocketed. He didn't need any more warnings. Whatever had happened here, whatever had taken the crew, was still out there. He sprinted back toward Valkyrie, his every step filled with urgency. As he reached the airlock, his sensors screamed movement just behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't look. He launched himself into his ship, sealed the hatch, and initiated emergency launch protocols. The moment Valkyrie detached from the horizon, his radar lit up with multiple contacts. Shadows moved in the void, dark shapes that the scanners couldn't fully. Crackled through his comms, not human, not robotic, but something else entirely. You should not have come. Before Adrian could react, the wreckage around him began shifting. The floating debris was not just random, it was part of something. Something vast. Something waking up. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. This was not just a battlefield. It was a trap. The ships had not simply been destroyed, they had been consumed. And now, Adrian was the next target. Slamming his controls, he powered up Valkyrie's thrusters, pushing them to their limits. The shadows moved faster, closing in on him. His ship's warning systems blared as energy readings spiked around him. Something was charging up some kind of weapon. He needed to escape, now. Activating his hyper-jump drive, he felt the ship vibrate violently. The dark forms lunged toward him just as the jump activated, hurling him back into the safety of known space. ASE caught his breath, staring at the empty void before him. One thing was clear, this was just the beginning. Something was waiting in that unknown frontier. Something old. Something deadly. And it had just seen its first human in a very, very long time. The deep silence of space surrounded Captain Adrian Voss as his fighter, Valkyrie, drifted through the darkness. His fingers hovered over the controls, his breathing slow and steady, but his mind was anything but calm. The discovery of the Lost Earth Alliance ship, EAS Horizon, had already shaken him. It had disappeared 30 years ago, yet here it was, floating lifelessly among shattered alien warships. The wreckage around it told a grim story. This place had witnessed a battle, one so violent that not a single ship had survived. But the real question haunted Adrian's thoughts. If the Horizon was here, where was the crew? His scanners showed no human life signs, no distress signals, only eerie silence. Something about this ship felt wrong, as if it wasn't just abandoned but hiding a secret that no one was meant to uncover. Yet, Adrian had to know the truth. Ignoring the chill creeping up his spine, he activated the docking sequence and stepped inside. The air inside the Horizon was stale and cold, a sharp contrast to the artificial warmth of Valkyrie. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting unsettling shadows across the metallic corridors. Adrian moved carefully, his boots making soft echoes in the hollow silence. The ship had been here for decades, but there was no sign of decay. No rust, no broken walls, no floating debris, just a frozen emptiness, as if time had stopped the moment the crew vanished. His gloved hand hovered over a control panel, wiping off a thin layer of frost. The ship still had minimal power. That didn't make sense. A derelict ship this old should have been nothing more than a dead husk, yet something was keeping it alive. His helmet's HUD displayed static-filled readings, distorted and unreadable. Something was interfering with his systems. Then, out of nowhere, a sound echoed through the corridor. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Adrian's heart pounded as he turned sharply. But there was nothing. Just the endless corridor stretching into darkness. The sound had been faint, almost like metal against metal, but its meaning was clear. He was not alone. Swallowing his fear, he pressed forward, heading towards the bridge. If there were any answers, they would be there. As he reached the main control room, his eyes locked onto the shattered remains of the captain's chair. The monitors were cracked, screens blinking erratically, but one caught his attention immediately. A message, fragmented but still repeating. Do not trust them. Do not engage. Leave while you still can. The words sent a shiver down his spine. Who had written this? Was it a final warning from the crew before they vanished? Or was someone still here, desperately trying to communicate? His thoughts were interrupted by movement, a flicker of something in his peripheral vision. He spun around, his blaster aimed, but again, nothing. His breathing quickened. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. The stillness of the ship was no longer just eerie, it felt aware. He turned back to the console, trying to access the ship's logs, but the moment he did, the entire system glitched. The lights flickered wildly, and a garbled voice crackled through the speakers, distorted but chilling. "They are watching." Adrian's stomach twisted. The voice didn't belong to the Horizon's crew. It was something else. Something that didn't belong here. His pulse hammered against his ribs as the ship suddenly lurched. Alarms blared in his helmet. His ship, Valkyrie, was detecting movement outside. Rushing to a nearby window, Adrian's breath caught in his throat. The debris field was shifting. Pieces of broken ships, lifeless metal, were moving. But it wasn't just random motion. They were aligning, forming patterns, as if something unseen was controlling them. His HUD? For an explanation, but the data made no sense. These ships weren't just floating wreckage, they were part of something much larger. Something that was waking up. Then, his radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't static. It was a whisper. A voice, faint but clear. "You are not supposed to be here." Adrian didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, his boots pounding against the metal floor as he sprinted back toward Valkyrie. Whatever was happening, he was not staying to find out. The ship shuddered as he reached the airlock, the sound of groaning metal echoing behind him. The temperature was dropping rapidly, frost forming on the walls as if something was draining the very heat from the ship. He forced open the hatch, threw himself into his cockpit, and sealed the doors just as his ship's system screamed with warnings. His radar was now flooded with signals unidentified contacts, dozens of them, circling like predators sensing prey. He didn't wait for a second longer. Engaging full thrusters, Valkyrie pulled away from the horizon, just as a shadow passed over its hull. A massive structure, hidden among the wreckage, was revealing itself. Adrian had been wrong, this was not a battlefield. It was a trap. The ships had not been destroyed in war. They had been captured, absorbed into something much larger, something ancient and patient. And now, it had noticed him. His hyper-jump drive initiated, but the dark forms were closing in fast. His ship's shields flared as energy pulses struck, but Valkyrie's cold darkness of space surrounded Captain Adrian Voss as his fighter, Valkyrie, drifted through the silent void. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was racing. The mission had been simple: survey a distant, uncharted sector where strange signals had been detected. But now, as he hovered in the unknown, he felt the weight of something unseen pressing against him. His sensors showed nothing unusual, just endless blackness dotted with distant stars, yet his instincts screamed that something was there, hiding, waiting. The silence wasn't normal. It wasn't empty. It was watching. His ship's AI Nova processed the readings again, searching for anomalies. No immediate threats detected, it reported, but Adrian wasn't convinced. The reports from previous reconnaissance missions had all ended the same way: ships vanishing without a trace, their last transmissions filled with static and distorted warnings. And now, he was here, alone, hoping not to meet the same fate. A faint blip appeared on his radar. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Adrian frowned, adjusting the sensors, but there was nothing. No movement. No signatures. Just silence. He exhaled slowly, convincing himself it was interference, but then it happened again. A flicker. A presence. Something was there, just outside his vision, slipping through the blackness like a shadow. He switched his systems to manual, adjusting the ship's thrusters to reposition himself. The moment he did, Nova spoke again, this time with a strange delay, as if something had interfered with its processing. "Captain, unidentified movement detected, but I cannot pinpoint its source." A chill ran down Adrian's spine. Before he could react, his ship's lights flickered. A deep, unnatural static crackled through his communication system, distorting the silence into an eerie hum. His fingers hovered over the weapon controls, but there was nothing to target. It was as if the enemy was there, but not there at the same time. His breathing slowed as his training took over. He had been in combat before. He had faced ambushes, outnumbered fights, impossible odds, but this was different. This wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. And he was the prey. His ship jolted slightly, as if an invisible force had brushed against it. Adrian spun his vessel in a sharp arc, his eyes scanning the void. Nothing. His mind raced. Was it cloaking technology? Some kind of stealth field? If something was out there, it was toying with him, testing him. His fingers tightened on the trigger, ready to fire blind into the darkness, but he knew better. Wasting firepower on a ghost would only make him more vulnerable. Instead, he activated a pulse scan, sending a powerful energy wave outward. For a brief second, the scanners picked up something, a shape, massive, angular, hovering just at the edge of detection. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone again, swallowed by the void. Adrian's heart pounded. That was no asteroid. No debris. That was a ship bigger than anything he had ever encountered, and it was watching him, studying him. He had to move. Engaging his thrusters, he turned away from the anomaly, heading back toward safer space. But the moment he accelerated, his ship's systems went haywire. The radar blacked out, his controls stiffened, and the temperature inside Valkyrie dropped sharply. It was as if the very space around him had shifted, trapping him in an invisible grip. Then, a voice whispered through the static, "You should not be here." It was not human. It was not machine. It was something else entirely, something old, something patient. Adrian's breath hitched. This was not a random encounter. This was a warning. The enemy had seen him, had studied him, and now it had spoken. His instincts screamed for him to flee, but his body felt frozen, as if the weight of that unseen presence was pressing against him, pinning him in place. The flickering lights inside his cockpit pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern like a heartbeat. Or worse, like something breathing. Then the voice came again, this time clearer. "We see you." That was enough. Adrian slammed his emergency override, forcing Valkyrie into an instant jump sequence. The ship's engines roared to life, fighting against whatever force was trying to hold it down. The hull groaned under the pressure, warning alarms blaring in his ears. His vision blurred as the hyperjump finally activated, dragging him away from the silent horror lurking in the darkness. When he reappeared in safe space, his body sagged with relief. His systems rebooted, the lights stabilized, and Nova's voice returned to normal. "Captain, we have escaped. No further anomalies detected." Adrian exhaled sharply, staring at the endless void before him. He had survived. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The enemy was out there. It had watched him, and it had let him go. Not because he had escaped, but because it wanted him to leave. It wanted him to deliver a message. Something was coming. Something was waiting. And now, it knew that humanity was watching too. The darkness of space stretched endlessly before Captain Adrian Voss as his fighter, Valkyrie, soared through the void. He had flown this ship through countless battles, escaped impossible odds, and outrun death itself more times than he could count. But tonight, something felt different. The mission had been simple: scout the remains of an ancient battlefield where a long-forgotten war had left nothing but floating wreckage. Yet, the moment he arrived, a strange energy pulsed through his ship, rattling its core. His fingers tightened on the controls as he checked the systems. Everything seemed normal, but his instincts screamed otherwise. Something was here. Something unseen. And it was waking up. His radar flickered with interference, showing ghostly blips that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. The wreckage surrounding him drifted in eerie silence, the shattered remains of alien warships floating like frozen corpses. He had seen battlefields before, but this one was different. There was no decay, no signs of scavengers, no trace of time eroding the metal. It was as if the wreckage had been preserved, trapped in a moment, untouched by the universe. And then, without warning, Valkyrie's engines pulsed with a surge of power. Adrian's eyes widened as the ship trembled beneath him, its core reactor humming with an intensity he had never felt before. His AI Nova flickered to life. Warning, unidentified energy surge detected within the vessel. Adrian's heart pounded. His ship was changing. He gripped the controls, but the thrusters were no longer responding. The ship was moving on its own, drawn towards something deep within the wreckage. His attempts to override the system failed whatever was happening. Valkyrie's hull began to glow faintly, intricate symbols appearing along its surface, symbols he had never seen before. The ship wasn't just reacting to the energy it was absorbing it. The realization sent a chill through him. What kind of power was buried here? And why was Valkyrie responding to it? The moment he thought the ship would be torn apart, everything stopped. The energy pulsing through the vessel stabilized, and the radar cleared. Adrian took a shaky breath, regaining control of his ship. But before he could process what had just happened, a warning alert blared across his console. Incoming hostiles detected. His blood ran cold. The battlefield had been silent for centuries, but now something had noticed him. The wreckage was no longer lifeless. It was stirring, shifting. Pieces of broken warships began to realign, forming monstrous, half-repaired constructs. And then, from the shadows of the ruined vessels, dark shapes emerged, machines unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek and ancient, their weapons glowing with unreadable symbols. They had been... Adrian didn't hesitate. He pushed Valkyrie into full thrust, darting between the debris as the enemy ships moved to intercept. Energy bolts streaked past him, barely missing his hull. His reflexes kicked in, maneuvering through the wreckage, dodging the relentless attacks. But something was wrong. His ship felt different, faster, more responsive, as if it wasn't just following his commands but anticipating them. He rolled sharply to avoid a direct hit, and without him even activating the weapons, Valkyrie fired a blast of energy unlike anything in its arsenal. The beam cut through an enemy ship effortlessly, disintegrating it in a flash of blue light. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. That wasn't standard weaponry. That was something else. The enemy hesitated, as if realizing what had just happened. The ship they had targeted, Valkyrie, was no ordinary fighter. It carried something ancient, something powerful, and now it had awakened. The realization hit Adrian like a shockwave. The energy he had felt earlier, the strange symbols on his ship, it wasn't just reacting to the battlefield. It was part of it. Valkyrie had been built with more than human technology. And now, that hidden power was emerging. More enemy ships swarmed toward him, their movements becoming frantic, desperate. They weren't attacking out of strategy. They were trying to destroy him before his ship unlocked its full potential. But it was too late. Valkyrie's systems surged with newfound energy, and Adrian could feel it like an extension of himself. He dodged effortlessly, firing blasts that tore through enemy after enemy. The wreckage around him trembled, as if responding to his ship's presence, and suddenly, the battlefield was alive. A deep, mechanical voice echoed through his communication system, ancient and distorted. "You are the key. The war is not over." Adrian's heart pounded as the final enemy ship exploded in a burst of energy. The battlefield fell silent once more, but he knew this was far from over. His ship, Valkyrie, was no longer just a fighter. It was something more, something forgotten. And now, its true power was awakening. As he prepared to leave, his radar flickered one last time. A massive structure, hidden within the wreckage, was beginning to rise. A signal pulsed from deep within it, an ancient call, summoning something far greater than he had ever imagined. Adrian exhaled, gripping the controls. He had come here for answers, but now he had only more questions. One thing was certain: the hidden power of Valkyrie was only the beginning. And whatever war had once raged here, it was about to begin again. The battlefield was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the eerie, suffocating stillness before a storm. Captain Adrian Voss stood alone on the bridge of his battered warship, Valkyrie, staring at the vast fleet of the Excelorian Empire assembled before him. Thousands of enemy vessels, stretching across space like a dark tidal wave, their weapons primed and ready to erase him from existence. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and yet he did not retreat. His hands gripped the controls, his jaw clenched. This was not about survival anymore. This was about sending a message. Humanity would not kneel. Not today. The comms crackled. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through his ship, filled with the arrogance of an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Human, your resistance is meaningless. Surrender, and we will grant you a swift end. Adrian exhaled slowly, his heart steady. He had fought the Accelerians before. He had seen what they did to civilizations that resisted entire planets reduced to dust, their people slaughtered or enslaved. The same fate awaited Earth if he failed. He pressed a button on his console, transmitting a response. Come and take me. The enemy ships moved. Like a well-orchestrated machine, they advanced in perfect formation, their glowing cannons charging with deadly energy. Adrian knew he had mere moments before the first barrage rained down upon him. He didn't waste them. With a flick of his wrist, he engaged Valkyrie's thrusters, launching forward with impossible speed. The enemy hesitated for a fraction of a second, surprised that a lone human ship dared to charge against their entire armada. It was a mistake they would regret. The first volley of energy blasts streaked toward him. Adrian twisted his ship sharply, maneuvering between the deadly fire with precision only years of battle could teach. The shots that did graze his hull left scorching marks, but Valkyrie held strong. He retaliated, unleashing a barrage of missiles that tore through the enemy's front lines. 2 Accelerian destroyers erupted into flames, their shattered remains spiraling into the void. But it wasn't enough. For every ship he destroyed, 100 more were waiting. Adrian's mind raced. He couldn't win this battle with fire. His ship reappeared behind the enemy flagship, its massive form dominating the space before him. The Accelerians weren't expecting a direct assault. That was their second mistake. Adrian unleashed everything: plasma cannons, torpedoes, EMP bursts. The flagship's shields flickered under the relentless attack, its hull cracking like glass. Alarms blared across the Accelerian fleet as their leader's ship trembled. For the first time, they knew fear, but victory was still far away. The Accelerians adapted quickly. Their remaining ships tightened their formation, cutting off his escape. Heavy cannons locked onto his position. A moment later, space was filled with fire. Valkyrie shook violently as energy blasts struck its shields. Warnings flashed across Adrian's screen. Hull integrity dropping. Weapons failing. Time running out. He gritted his teeth. He had come too far to die now. His mind latched onto one final, desperate plan. The enemy thought of him as nothing more than an insect, a minor nuisance delaying their inevitable victory. He would prove them wrong. He rerouted all remaining power into Valkyrie's reactor, overloading its core. The ship trembled under the strain, energy crackling through its systems. This was suicide. But if he had to die, he would take as many of them with him as possible. The enemy realized what he was doing. The Admiral's voice returned, now laced with panic. Human, stop this madness. You will destroy yourself. Adrian smirked. That's the idea. With a final push, he accelerated straight toward the enemy flagship, his ship burning like a comet. The Accelerians fired everything they had, but it was too late. Valkyrie collided with the flagship's core, and for a brief second, there was silence. Then an explosion unlike anything the universe had ever seen. A blinding wave of energy consumed the Accelerian fleet, tearing through their ranks like a cosmic inferno. Ships shattered. Fire and debris filled the void. The mighty armada that had once threatened to crush humanity was now nothing more than floating wreckage. And then, nothing. For a long time, the battlefield was still. No enemy ships remained. No voices echoed across the comms. Only silence. But in the ruins, among the shattered remains of the Accelerian fleet, a single distress beacon flickered. Valkyrie had been destroyed, but Adrian Voss had survived. The war was not over. The Empire would return, stronger, angrier. But today, one human had stood against them. And today, humanity had won.